The topic of indie games and their lack of any real presence on the Switch 2 keeps cropping up, with the latest I've seen being from indie dev Cowcat Games making note on Twitter that we're 4 months into the past, console's launch date, and most indie developers are still receiving radio silence from Nintendo when it comes to obtaining developer kits or general access to the platform at all. I can personally attest to this being the case, having an active hand in indie game publishing. Primarily physical and collector's releases, of course, but most developers I've discussed with are in the same boat. This isn't an isolated dev getting the cold shoulder from Nintendo. Hell, the request I personally oversaw was promptly rejected with a template answer. So we can be pretty confident Nintendo are being very selective with who they are letting develop for the Switch 2. The selective process is likely to be a mix of historical sales and the volume of titles released on the eShop by any one publisher, but whatever the specifics are, we can be pretty confident it's in place. Why would Nintendo want to limit developers in the first place? If you watched my last video on Xbox Game Pass, you remember I talked a lot about how losing games, exclusives, and developers for your platform will lead to your console being devalued. While I stand by that, and many would likely agree, the circumstances are quite different for Nintendo. One of the often cited issues with Nintendo's Switch store, which I'll probably interchangeably call the eShop by the way, old habits die hard. But the problem with it is that discovery can be a huge nightmare. Whether you're trying to find a game or have your game found, the sheer volume on the platform means users are often drowning in abundance. What might sound like a gamer's heaven could often become more of a slog to find something that you personally would like to play. This is by no means limited to the eShop. Many platforms, whether it be Steam or the iOS store, they all experience the same issue. The platforms that run into this issue often do so because the platform is fairly accessible to develop for, but just as importantly because it has a lot of users, making it incredibly appealing for developers to make sure their game is compatible and ready to list. If Nintendo wants to guarantee their key partners get prime discoverability on the platform, as it is currently, then the most surefire way is to heavily curate what is available to the consumer. You might be listening to this and thinking, that sounds like hubris. And, well, you'd be right. We can't forget Nintendo are taking this approach on the back of the Switch 1, arguably the most popular console out there. If you developed a game, you developed it for the Switch 1. If you were to look at a game for physical release, one of my first thoughts would be, is it on the Switch? It can't be denied, it's an incredibly popular console. But Nintendo's hubris is not just being fed by their previous success. The Switch 2 is one of the fastest selling consoles to date, and there isn't even a Pokemon game out yet. If I had to guess, Nintendo are feeling threatened in their area of the console space, so they're taking it slow. How slow? If I had to guess, most indie devs will be sitting on their hands when it comes to the Switch 2 until 2026, which kinda sucks to say and probably sucks to hear. Pokemon should make a noticeable lift in adoption rates this month and as well as throughout the holiday season, which is when Nintendo that's when Nintendo will want to be pushing their curated titles. Quarter 1 can be a bit of a snooze fest for game releases sometimes, so preparing and opening up the gates to indie devs early 2026 after just over a half a year or so of control, this could be a reasonable expectation. Maybe Nintendo are cooking up some solutions for discovery on their platform. Hey, a guy can dream, right? But some basic improvements could definitely help discovery, maybe more than, just what's new and what's discounted. What would you guys put there?